This is a Truth Talk News special report.
Frank Olson was a senior U.S. microbiologist at Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland. Recruited from the University of Wisconsin, where fate would have it, his departmental advisor was Ira Baldwin, the scientist who, along with big pharma giant George Merck and the U.S. military, established the U.S. bioweapons program in 1943. Olson had been assigned as a contact with the CIA's technical services staff run by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and his deputy, Robert Lashbrook, to conduct experiments with bioweapons, toxins, and mind control drugs. The project was called MKNAOMI, MKULTRA, previously known as Project Artichoke and earlier Project Bluebird. The torturous program was justified, like the nuclear arms race, due to claims that similar programs to create a Manchurian candidate were being conducted by the Soviets. Got to keep up with the Joneses. In 1953, as Deputy Acting Head of Special Operations for the CIA, Olson associated with Dr. William Sargent, investigating the use of psychoactive drugs at Britain's Biological Warfare Center at Porton Down. Olson was privy to the highly classified secrets of the CIA interrogation and biowarfare programs. On several occasions, he attended MKUltra torture sessions at Porton Down and was increasingly plagued by what he had witnessed. On Wednesday, November 18, 1953, Frank Olson joined a group of CIA Special Operations Division agents, including Vincent Ruett, Chief of the Division, John Malowski, Gerald Yonitz, Ben Wilson, and John Schwab, on a retreat to Deep Creek Lake, some 3 hours' drive from Fort Detrick. The group was met at the lodge by Sidney Gottlieb, his deputy, Robert Lashbrook, and several others from the CIA. On the second day of the retreat, after dinner, Gottlieb spiked a bottle of Cointreau with a small quantity of a substance that he and his TSS colleagues privately referred to as cerunin, but which was, in actuality, lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. Olson asked to quit the biowarfare program and devote his life to something else. The LSD was the icing on the cake. Olson was done with the criminally insane agency. The CIA's version of events state that due to the LSD dosing, Olson suffered severe paranoia, and he had a nervous breakdown. He was asked to go to New York to meet with their private psychiatrist, Harold Abramson, who was centrally involved in the research. Abramson recommended that Olson be placed in a mental institution for recovery. The CIA claimed that on his last night in Manhattan, Olson purportedly threw himself out of the window of his 10th floor hotel room at the Hotel Pennsylvania, which he had been sharing with CIA agent Robert Lashbrook. The biological warfare program and the chemical interrogation programs then remained hidden from the public until Richard Nixon's disclosure of the biowarfare program in 1969. Until then, the Olson family had no knowledge of the details of the accident. The U.S. President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States was set up under President Gerald Ford in 1975 to investigate the activities of the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies within the United States. The commission was led by Vice President Puppet Master Nelson Rockefeller, and is sometimes referred to as the Rockefeller Commission. The commission was created in response to a December 1974 report in the New York Times that the CIA had conducted illegal domestic activities, including experiments on U.S. citizens, during the 1960s. The Controlled Commission issued a single report in 1975 touching upon certain CIA abuses, including mail opening and surveillance of domestic dissident groups. It publicized Project MKUltra, a mind control study. In 1994, Eric Olson had his father's body exhumed to have a second autopsy performed. The 1953 medical report, done immediately after Dr. Olson's death, indicated that there were cuts and abrasions on the body. When the second autopsy was performed by James Starrs, professor of law and forensic science at the National Law Center at George Washington University, his team searched the body for any cuts and abrasions and found none. Starrs found a large hematoma on the left side of Olson's head and a large injury on his chest. The team concluded that the blunt force trauma to the head and injury to the chest had not occurred during the fall, but most likely in the room prior to the fall. The evidence was called rankly and starkly suggestive of homicide. Based on his findings, the 1996 Manhattan District Attorney opened a homicide investigation into Olson's death, but was unable to find enough evidence to bring charges.
The film you are about to see represents a significant breakthrough in the advancing science of the motion picture. You are about to witness history in the making.
I first dropped acid when I was 18. I was over at these people's house one night. This guy I went to school with was over there and asked me if I wanted to try some acid. I had read about it in the newspapers and heard a few friends talk about it, so I was curious. I was pretty jacked up on marijuana, so I decided to try it, and I dropped it.
As we see it, the typical psychiatric ward, LSD is certainly much more than a mere fad. Right now we have over a dozen people hospitalized because of acute symptoms resulting directly from their taking LSD. What is LSD? How does it work? When did it all begin?
It all began in a laboratory very much like this one. In 1938, Dr. Albert Hoffman in Switzerland was looking for new drugs in the treatment of migraine headaches. He had been studying substances that came from the molds that grow on rye plants. Now, it turned out that these substances were of no use in the treatment of migraine headaches, but subsequent investigation showed that they are very fascinating indeed in the changes that they produce in our mental state.
Changes in mental states, it turns out, was precisely what the United States Central Intelligence Agency was interested in. As these declassified documents show, beginning as early as 1953, under the codename MKULTRA, the CIA was beginning to experiment with LSD as a mind control drug. In particular, they were interested in the effects of LSD on an unwitting subject in a real-life setting. To that end, MKUltra operatives started spontaneously dosing themselves and other agents with the drug. Things got so out of hand that a memo was circulated among the CIA staff. This memo stated, in part, that they did not recommend testing LSD in the Christmas punch bowls usually present at the Christmas office parties.
So we tripped down to Market Street, and I decided to buy a hot dog. I put the hot dog up to my mouth, and somebody started screaming. I didn't know what was happening, so I looked up at my friend Terry and said, "Did you hear that? Didn't you hear someone scream?" He said no. I got the hot dog up to my mouth again, and I was ready to bite, and the scream got louder. And I looked down at the hot dog, and there was a face on him. Eyes, nose, a mouth. I had put the ketchup to where it looked like his hair. And he started telling me that I couldn't eat him. That he had a wife and 7 kids at home to support. And I stood there with this hot dog and asked Terry, "Do you know this hot dog is talking to me?"
This girl is obviously acutely disturbed. She will be in the hospital for a few weeks or a few months. Some others who take LSD will have even more tragic freakouts. And there's no way to tell which ones these will be. Some forget what height means, and in a turned-on or euphoric state, step or attempt to fly from cliffs and high windows with real-life, permanent, non-psychedelic results.
One of the first people to ever experience something with real-life, permanent, non-psychedelic results was Dr. Frank Olson. Dr. Olson was a U.S. Army scientist who specialized in bacteriological warfare research, most specifically anthrax. In November of 1953, Olson and a group of CIA and Army technicians gathered at a location in remote Maryland for a work-related getaway. At one point during the meeting, a high-ranking CIA official dosed the gathered scientists with LSD. Whereas most of the participants enjoyed the experience, Olson's behavior was completely altered. He became sullen and withdrawn, and seemed to experience remorse at the type of work he was doing. His supervisor sent him to a CIA psychiatrist in New York, who recommended that Olson be put into a sanatorium. On his last night in Manhattan, Olson and Dr. Robert Lashbrook, the CIA agent responsible for watching out for him, checked into the Statler Hilton Hotel. Sometime during the night, Lashbrook woke to the sound of breaking glass. Olson had thrown himself out the window to the street 10 floors below. The matter was investigated by the CIA, who determined that Olson had committed suicide.
Finally, I decided I was just hallucinating, so I put it in my mouth and bit down. It screamed so loud that you could hear
See,
it
this
all
is
over town,
propaganda
so
so
I
that
had
you would
to throw it
believe
on the
that he
ground
was
and
just
step on it.
tripping on the acid, and that's why he killed himself, not that he
And I
was
was
murdered
standing on
by
this
the
hot dog in the
CIA.
middle of Market Street. I realized that I had murdered it. And I took off screaming down the street, scared.
Also running scared at this time was the CIA. In 1975, the Rockefeller Commission, appointed by President Gerald Ford, seen here at right, started conducting an investigation of some of the alleged misdeeds of the CIA. Some of the first excesses of the agency to come to light were the MKULTRA experiments and the death of Frank Olson. Olson's family, unaware of the true circumstances surrounding Frank's demise, was shocked. In response, the White House offered the Olsons an apology and a monetary settlement. The family was even brought to the White House to meet with Gerald Ford, seen here again on right. Prior to the Olsons' arrival in Washington, a memo was circulated among the White House staff outlining their strategy in dealing with the Olson case. The memo was addressed to staff member Donald Rumsfeld. The memo's author, Dick Cheney. Frank Olson's son, Eric, had lingering doubts about the circumstances surrounding his father's death. In 1994, he had his father's body exhumed and autopsied by a team of forensic scientists. One of the first things the medical team noticed was the presence of a severe hematoma, or hemorrhage, on the temple of Frank Olson's skull, a wound, some of the doctors agreed, that was there before Olson's fall out of the Statler window. The team's leader, Dr. James Starrs, wrote in his report, "It is my view, and a number of my team members, that it was homicide." The film Case Study LSD was produced by the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. Another of Lockheed's products was the U-2 spy plane, which they built under contract for the CIA.
Well now, you've heard from both sides of the question. But what you do with your life is up to you. You have the choice to have the courage to see and deal with the world for what it really is. Far, far from perfect, but for you and for me, the only one there is.
Why must you die when you can be up? Why not just take the dare Don't be chicken and square. Come on, baby, express yourself. You don't have to repress yourself, so why be lame? It's the hippest new game. It's just like Russian roulette when you're making a bet.